some strategies for factoring or finding factors if you can't think of them off the top of your head real quick. So I'm going to give you one here, and we're going to go through the process of how we can do this using maybe various technology tools. So we go x squared plus 10x minus 144. Okay? So what stinks about this is that this number is pretty large, right? And a lot of times that's going to happen, especially when we start dealing with problems that are like real life applications. A lot of times the numbers, the coefficients end up being pretty nasty. Okay, so you don't want to sit here and think, okay, 1 and 144, 2 and 72, 3 and 48. You don't want to do that, right? Okay, so here's my suggestion to you. You can do it a couple different ways. So yesterday, I tried to show you with Excel, and I thought against that, but it does work out pretty nice on Excel. Now I know that we don't maybe have the greatest knowledge of Excel, which is fine. I was your age. I didn't have a clue about it. But there are some things that we can do here that makes this process really, really, really easy. Okay? We can go through. All I'm going to do is basically put 1, 2, 3 in this first column. Okay? We have to use enough values for this thing to see us develop a pattern. So what do you think the next one's going to be? 4. And you can keep typing them in if you want to do it that way. It's just time consuming. But what you can do is you can actually highlight these. So all you do is you click on the first one and then click and hold and then drag down to select all of them. And then there's a little green box down here in the bottom right corner. If you click on that and drag straight down, you can kind of see, if you're close, you see this little rectangle above my cursor? It's just telling me what is going to go in those boxes. So if I scroll enough, it's going to give me all of those, just writes them in order. Does that make sense? There should be another way. I can't think off the top of my head how to do that. But now here's what I want to do. I want us to type in this number, okay? And I'm not going to worry about positive or negative. I'm just typing 144. I'll type in 144, and then actually I got to hit equal sign first. All right, equals, and then 144, and we're going to hit divide, and then you just click on this box right here. That's all you got to do, okay? Hit enter. So what this does is that this number divided by that number, or 144 divided by that number, gives me 144, right? I'm now going to drag this down as far as I need to. So let's just go down to, I'm going to fill it into 26. So let's see what this does. So when we do it that way, that number times that number, what do they give me when I multiply them? 144. What do those two numbers do when I multiply them? 144. What do those two numbers do when I multiply them? 144. Do you see how it's giving me the factors now of 144? Okay. Now these ones that are like decimal, and you can maybe just delete them right now. You don't have to. You can just ignore them. But if you were to write a list of factors, at least up to a factor of 24, and actually we've already got that. So if I wanted the factors of 144, there are 1 and 144, 2 and 72, 3 and 48, 4 and 36, 6 and 24, 8 and 18, 9 and 16, 12 and 12. And that's kind of the breaking point, 12 and 12, because now the next one is 16 and 9, but isn't that already right there? Okay. So those are my factors, instead of having to write the list down here. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Now, what's nice about that, now think about this. If you do this one time, I do this for one problem. Okay, let's say the next problem, instead of 144, it's maybe 220. All I got to do is change that number right there to 220, and then drag that down, and it does it for 220. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's a quicker way. But now if I'm going back to, oh, too far. 144, which factors are going to multiply together to give me 144, and which ones are going to add up to give me 10? Okay, so those are the ones that, basically what we're looking for is the ones that are 10 units apart, right? So that's the one. So now which one of those, so we're going to have 8 and 18. Which one of them needs to be positive? Which one of them needs to be negative? Okay, negative 8. So we're going to go x minus 8 and x plus 18. And now we have that thing factored pretty quickly. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's do an example of x squared minus 17x plus 66. Okay, so if we do that, okay, I'm going to come back up to this. I'm going to double click on there, and I'll put, instead of 144, I'll put 66 in. And I'm going to drag that all the way through. Okay. And now I'm going to look at the whole number one. So that's gone. Don't care about these. Don't care about any of these up until that one. Don't care about those. Okay. Which ones, okay, are going to work together to give me 17? If I add, now when I'm doing this, I got to view them as being either positive or negative or a combination of them. But which ones are going to maybe add 6 and 11? Those two there do, if they're both negative, add up to give me negative 17, right? So then we're going to look at x minus 6, x minus 11. Does that help us factor those quickly? Okay. Now, obviously, you probably don't want to use that if this number is pretty small. Let's do this. Let's say that we've got a number. All right, so let's try this. Let's go x squared minus 2x minus 2400. Okay. Would you guys agree that that's a pretty large number, 2400? Okay. If we're talking about two numbers that are going to add up, that multiply together to give me 2400, but add up to give me negative 2. Think about that negative 2. If that negative 2 was 0, that would mean that the two numbers that multiply together to give me 2400 would be opposites of one another, right? Does that make sense to everybody? Guys, we're working on this up here. Everybody, not too many of us are paying attention. If I'm multiplying two numbers together to give me 2400, and they're adding up to negative 2, this is close to 0. Agree with that? So the two numbers that we're going to use to multiply together to give me 2400, those are close to being opposites. Does that make sense? Okay. Well, to be the exact opposite, if I take two numbers and multiply them together to give me 2400, and those two numbers are the same number, does anybody know what those are called, or what 2400 would be called? Think about this. Let's say that I take 3 times 3, and I multiply it together, and I get 9. 9 is called a what? Or 4 times 4 gives me 16. 16 is a what? Because it was multiplied together. It was generated by multiplying the same number by itself. Starts with a P. Ends with perfect. Anybody heard this before, perfect square? Okay. So, what can I do with 9? If 9 is a perfect square, how can I know that it was generated by 3 times 3? Does anybody know how to do that? What can I do to 9 to get back to 3? Okay. That'll work. But square, because in this case, what I'm looking at is, let's say that I have 256. Okay, 256 is a perfect square, but do you know what number multiplied together you get? So I can't do the division there because I don't know what to divide it by. But you said square root, right? So I can square root this. If I square root this, it gets me back to 16. Okay, so it would give me 16 and 16, and if one of those is positive and one of those negative, those would add to 0, right? So if I had something like x squared minus 0x, or plus 0x, doesn't matter, minus 256, then I could go 16 and negative 16. Those are two numbers that multiply together, give me that, and add to give me that. This is different because it's not 0 there in yellow, but it's close to 0. So what I'm going to do to determine these factors quickly, we could still use Excel. But if I'm going to use Excel, I'm going to have to drag this thing down very far. Okay, and that gets just very tedious. There's going to be a lot of factors here. So if this number is really close to 0, and this number is really large, take the square root of that number. Okay, so if I'm going to take the square root, let's see here. If I go square root of 2400, gives me that number right there, 48.98. Okay? Now, that's not my factor, but that's a starting point. Okay? The next thing you're going to do is you're going to round that number either direction. So round it either up or round it down. Which one do you want to round it to? Round it up. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 2400 and you're going to divide it by that number rounded up. So divide by 49. And I'm going to see, did it give me a whole number? If it gave me a whole number, then that's one of my factors. But it doesn't give me a whole number. So then I'm going to take that 49 that I'm dividing by, and I'm going to move it up one more. And it gives me a whole number now, right? What do you notice about the difference between those two whole numbers? How far apart are they? They're 2 apart. That's the 2 that they're apart. So one of my numbers was 48, the other one was 50. Which one needs to be positive and which one needs to be negative? If I want to add them to get negative 2. It needs to be a negative 50 and a positive 48. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. That number also tells you, I tried, when we rounded this, I tried the 49 first, and then I basically succeeded or had a success when I rounded up a second time to 50. So I did 2 adjustments essentially to that number, and that 2 adjustments correlate to that. So if that number was a 5, I would have had to actually make 5 adjustments before I realized the number. So let me do one more here real quick, and then I'll give you some time to work on some stuff. So remember, mathematics is all about learning procedures so that we can shortcut things. We can avoid as many calculations as possible. Okay, so what I'm kind of trying to demonstrate here are some relationships that are always existing that would allow you to circumvent some handwritten work. Now, this number it's not 0. It's not as close to 0 as negative 2 was, but in comparison to how big this number is, that's pretty close to 0. Does that make sense? So I'm going to take that number right there, 1968. I'll take the square root of it. So square root 1968, I get 44.3. What do you want to round that to? 44? Okay, so I'm going to round it up or sorry, round it down. So we're going to round down to 44. So I'm going to divide by 44. And it does not give me a whole number. So then I'm going to either, it doesn't matter which direction you go, either continue working down to go to 43 and then 42 and then 41, or go up to 45. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to go up to 45. Always go up. So I go to 45. That doesn't give me a whole number. 46 doesn't. 47 doesn't. 48 does. 48 and 41. 48 and 41. Are they 7 apart? So 48, 41. Which one needs to be negative? The 41, and the 48 is positive. So those are little tricks and tips that can help us. And that's the thing, guys. Down the road, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, 4 chapters from now, when we're still doing this, you don't want to spend 5 minutes writing out all the factors of 1968 and trying to determine which ones add up to give me 7, because there's other parts of the problem 3, 4 chapters from now that are going to take maybe twice as long as that. Does that make sense? So you don't want to be spending a lot more unnecessary time. So I'll give you these strategies to help out with that. On your TIA3, does anybody have I don't want to use this if nobody's going to use it. Does anybody have a TIA3 or A4 that they use? Nobody uses the one on their computer? Because you can do the same thing on that as you do on Excel. Okay? But if you guys don't want to use it, tell you what, I'm going to show people at home. So basically all we do is we go to, I don't know, maybe we did this yesterday as well. But we just go to y equals. If I want to go find the factors of 1968. So 1968, just like the last question. I type that in, and I divide it by, and now in this case, I'm going to say x. Okay? Then I'm going to go over here where it says table. I'm going to hit the second key right here, and then go to table. And now what it will do is give me those are 2 factors of 1968. Those are 2 of 1968. Those are 2. And I'm going to basically scroll through here, adding the guess. So this is what would be kind of would stink if I've got a very large number, is that there's a lot of things that I was adding up to see, do they add up to 7, before I found those 2 that do add, one being negative, one being positive, do add to 7. Okay? Okay. So those are some varying techniques to help you do things a little bit quicker. My hope is that you use those techniques. Right now, there is an assignment in Math Excel. It's called Factoring X Squared plus BX plus C. Give you guys time to work on that, get that completed. So you guys can start now on that.